Kalen Ward was born under the pale lights of Leora 7's settlement, a distant human colony far from Earth. The moment he opened his eyes, the caretakers noticed something unusual. His irises glimmered gold, like molten sunlight captured in a tiny sphere. It was the kind of color that no one had ever seen on a human before. The nurses whispered among themselves, unsure if it was a blessing or a sign of danger. The orphanage where he would grow up was quiet and simple, built from recycled metals and stone from the colony's surface. It housed children who had lost their parents or had been abandoned. Most of them were ordinary with brown, blue, or green eyes, but Kalen's golden eyes made him stand out. Some of the older children stared at him, unsure what to think. Some were curious, drawn to the unusual light in his eyes, while others kept their distance, whispering stories of myths and legends they had heard from the colony elders. Despite the attention, Kalen was just a baby. He didn't know why people looked at him differently. He cried when hungry, laughed when tickled, and slept through the colony's noisy nights like any other child. His world was small at first: the orphanage walls, the narrow courtyard, the caretakers who fed him and tucked him into bed. The caretakers were kind people, though they had little to give. Maria and Thomas, two of the older staff, watched over him with a mixture of awe and worry. Maria would hum soft songs at night, rocking him gently when he couldn't sleep. Thomas always smiled, even when he was tired, and carried him across the courtyard to see the first sunrise of each day. They never knew the full story of his birth. The parents were unknown, and the colony records gave nothing beyond a birth certificate. As Kalen grew into a toddler, the golden color of his eyes seemed to glow faintly in dim light. The older children often asked questions. "Why are your eyes like that?" one would say, tilting their head. "Are you magic?" another would whisper. Kalen did not understand these words, but he could sense the strange mix of fear and fascination. Sometimes when he laughed, the sunlight would catch his eyes just so, making them almost shine across the room, and the other children would stop talking and stare. The orphanage had rules, simple ones, but no one dared to tell him he was different in a harsh way. Instead they watched. The caretakers were careful not to scold him too much. They learned quickly that he was clever, noticing things other children did not. He would find hidden objects, solve small puzzles, and understand instructions without asking questions. It was as if his mind absorbed information faster than normal. The whispers among the staff grew. "There is something about him," Maria said quietly to Thomas one evening as they prepared dinner. "Something ancient." Thomas nodded, rubbing his tired eyes. "He's just a child," he replied. "We'll keep him safe. That's all we can do." The colony council, responsible for overseeing the orphanage, heard rumors about the boy. Some worried about the implications of a human born with golden eyes. They sent a few officials to inspect, noting him carefully. Kalen, even as a young child, did not react with fear. He smiled at the visitors, his gaze steady, his eyes bright. They whispered among themselves that there was power in him, though none could explain why. As Kalen grew older, he began to explore more of the orphanage. The small courtyard became his kingdom. He chased the other children, played in the sun, and sometimes sat quietly under the observation dome, staring at the stars visible through the thin glass. He would trace constellations with his tiny fingers, imagining stories and adventures no one had told him. The other children slowly came to accept him, not because of his golden eyes, but because of the kindness he showed even at a young age. He shared food, comforted those who were hurt, and laughed at the smallest joys. One day, while exploring an unused storage room, Kalen found a small mirror. He looked at his reflection and blinked. The golden eyes looked back at him, almost alive. He reached out, touching the glass, fascinated by the light. A shiver ran down his small spine, but it was not fear. It was curiosity, a sense that he was connected to something bigger than himself, though he did not yet know what. By the time he was 5, the stories of the golden-eyed boy had spread across the colony. Some elders whispered that he carried the blood of legendary humans from old Earth, humans said to be leaders, thinkers, and warriors long forgotten. No proof existed, only speculation and stories passed down in hushed tones. Kalen did not understand these whispers, but he felt their weight. Sometimes, adults would stop and watch him for a moment longer than needed, as if sensing that he was not an ordinary child. Despite the attention, Kalen remained a simple boy in heart. He loved to run, to play, to imagine. At night, he would fall asleep in the arms of Maria, listening to her soft songs, never knowing that the galaxy beyond Leora 7 was beginning to notice him. His golden eyes, bright and steady, were more than unusual, they were a signal. A signal that something extraordinary had arrived, and that in time, the council, the colony, and perhaps the universe itself would realize that the orphan child held a secret far greater than anyone could imagine. Through all this, Kalen's life in the orphanage was simple and small, filled with laughter, curiosity, and gentle lessons from his caretakers. He did not yet understand the blood he carried, the destiny that would one day awaken, or the way his golden eyes marked him as someone unique. All he knew was the warmth of human kindness and the small joys of growing up. And yet, the moment he looked at the stars each night, his golden eyes reflected something older, something larger, as if a silent voice across the universe was calling him. He did not understand the call, but he felt it, deep in his heart. The orphanage, the caretakers, the whispers, they were only the beginning. From that first sunrise to the first steps he took across the courtyard, Kalen Ward's life had begun in quiet mystery, with golden eyes that shone brighter than sunlight, hinting at a future no one could yet see. As Kalen grew older, the world around him began to react in ways no one could explain. At first, it was small and almost accidental. When he pressed his tiny hands on the panels of the orphanage's old machines, they hummed to life, lights flickering steadily instead of erratically as they usually did. A broken food synthesizer that had not worked for months suddenly spat out a warm tray of nutrient paste when he leaned over it, fascinated by the blinking buttons. The caretakers were astonished but could not understand why. Outside, animals seemed drawn to him. Small creatures from the colony's surrounding plains, a few rabbits, bright feathered birds, even a stray dog that no one claimed, would approach him without hesitation. While other children ran and played, the animals would follow Kalen calmly, circling him as if he were a leader of some invisible pack. Other children noticed it and whispered. "He's not like us," they said. The animals know. Kalen didn't understand why they came, only that he liked their company. Their presence comforted him in the quiet nights when the orphanage felt too big and empty. It was not long before the events caught the attention of Dr. Mira Ellison, a scientist from the Colony Research Center. She had been studying human genetics and the lost lineages from Earth and other human colonies for decades. She was drawn to the rumors about the golden-eyed boy, though she initially dismissed them as exaggeration. When she finally met Kalen, she was taken aback. "Your eyes?" she whispered, almost to herself as she examined him with her instruments. The golden irises reflected the overhead lights in a way that seemed alive. No one has had eyes like these in centuries. Kalen tilted his head, curious. "What do you mean?" he asked in his small, clear voice. Mira explained as best she could, though the details were complex. She ran scans and genetic tests, each one confirming the impossible. "Your DNA," she said finally, "matches a line of humans believed extinct. The royal line of the first human empire. You carry their blood." The news spread quickly among the research team. They were shocked. The first empire had vanished long before humans had settled Leora 7. Its leaders were thought to be gone forever. No one expected a child born on a distant colony to hold such a legacy. Kalen didn't understand what this meant. "I'm just me," he said quietly, looking down at his small hands. But the implications were enormous. The Council of Leora 7 learned of the tests and results. They called emergency meetings, their concern growing with each new report. A child, they realized, held not just unusual genetic traits but the blood of rulers, strategists, and leaders who had once controlled entire sectors of human space. "We cannot underestimate him," one council member said, frowning. "Even a child can inspire loyalty, and loyalty can become power. Too much power for one person could destabilize the colony, and worse, the galaxy." Another council member argued, "He's just a boy. Surely we can guide him, keep him under observation, prevent any trouble." But the first council member shook his head. "Observation is not enough. Something in his nature, something we cannot control, is awakening." Meanwhile, Kalen continued his daily life in the orphanage, unaware of the political tension surrounding him. He laughed with the other children, learned simple mathematics and reading, and explored the small library filled with old histories of human colonies. Yet the strange events persisted. Machines seemed drawn to him, following his touch as if recognizing him. The colony's AI, meant to maintain order and monitor systems, occasionally responded to him without command. Doors unlocked themselves, lights dimmed or brightened according to his moods, and occasionally, it felt as if the environment itself was listening. Animals became his companions in ways that surprised even the caretakers. Birds landed on his shoulders, rabbits and small mammals stayed near him when he walked across the courtyard, and a stray dog he named Jasper followed him everywhere. When older children tried to tease him about it, Jasper would growl softly, a warning that kept them away. Dr. Mira Ellison spent more time observing Kalen, fascinated by the combination of genetics and behavior. She noticed subtle signs of intelligence and leadership beyond his age. When the children played group games, Kalen often became the center of attention, not because he demanded it, but because others looked to him instinctively. He seemed to know how to organize, guide, and calm them without speaking more than necessary. "Look at him," Mira said one day to a colleague. "He doesn't just react, he influences the air, the people, even the machines around him. There's something in his blood, his heritage, that's very old. It's as if the First Empire left a signal in him." The colleague frowned. "You mean, he's special?" "Yes," Mira said quietly. "Not just special. Potentially, historic." By the time Kalen was 7, the council had increased their observation. They assigned officials to keep track of him, instruct the caretakers on behavior, and limit what he could access in the colony. But every effort seemed to backfire. Kalen remained kind, gentle, and curious, never resentful or rebellious. The people he met instinctively trusted him, instinctively followed his lead, and often sought his advice, though he was still just a child. The council began to feel a rising fear. They had never dealt with a human who could inspire loyalty without speaking orders, a human whose presence seemed to command respect by mere existence. Some whispered that this golden-eyed boy could unify humans across colonies or even challenge their authority. Yet, for all the worry and speculation, Kalen remained unaware of the weight of his bloodline. He only knew the comfort of caring adults, the companionship of other children, and the soft attention of the animals and machines that followed him. At night, he would stare at the stars through the observation dome, imagining adventures across the galaxy. Sometimes he felt a pull, an unspoken connection to something far away, a voice calling in silence. He did not understand it, but it made him feel calm and safe, as if he belonged to something larger than himself. And so life continued, quietly yet strangely extraordinary. Kalen Ward, the golden-eyed orphan, grew each day, small in stature but slowly revealing the ancient legacy hidden in his blood. The caretakers watched with love, the council watched with caution, and Dr. Mira Ellison watched with scientific awe. Unbeknownst to the colony, the universe was beginning to take notice. The child who seemed ordinary in so many ways was not ordinary at all. Within him, the memory and strength of the First Empire waited to awaken. Every gaze, every touch, every hum of life around him seemed to respond to his presence. It was only a matter of time before the council realized that the child they feared could not be controlled, and that his golden eyes were more than a sign, they were a warning. The Council of Leora 7 was growing more uneasy by the day. Reports from the orphanage, from Dr. Mira Ellison, and from colony observers all pointed to the same truth. Kalen Ward, the golden-eyed boy, was extraordinary. But extraordinary could be dangerous, and the council feared what might happen if his influence grew unchecked. They decided to act. Agents were sent to watch him closely, to make sure he did not speak to too many people or cause unrest among the colony's citizens. At first, the agents tried subtle measures, reminders to caretakers to limit Kalen's interaction with the other children, instructions to keep him occupied with simple chores, and occasionally small warnings to the boy himself. But Kalen was smart. He noticed patterns quickly, who watched him, which doors were locked, which people whispered about him when he passed. At first, he did not fully understand why these adults behaved strangely, but he knew something was different. His instincts told him to be careful, to observe before acting. Even as a child, he could read the intentions of others with uncanny clarity. Despite the restrictions, people continued to gravitate toward him. The other children still sought his guidance during games and group activities. They naturally listened when he spoke and they trusted his decisions. The caretakers noticed it too. Kalen could calm a frightened child with a gentle word or a smile, settle disputes without anger, and even inspire small acts of cooperation among children who had previously fought over toys or chores. The agents reported their observations to the council. "He is unusual," one said carefully. "We cannot force him. He seems to know more than we tell him." The council frowned. "Then we must increase oversight. Limit his movements further. Assign additional caretakers. He must not become a symbol, he must not lead." But each new restriction only proved Kalen's awareness. When a section of the orphanage was sealed off, he found another way to explore. When caretakers tried to keep him apart from other children, he still found small moments to connect, to share, to influence. People naturally trusted him even without understanding why. Even the adults began to notice it. Dr. Mira Ellison observed how workers responded to him. A maintenance crew fixing the orphanage's generator would hesitate, then quietly adjust their behavior when Kalen approached. Tools that were usually clumsy in their hands seemed to respond as if guided. Machines hummed with life when he was near. It was subtle but undeniable. The council convened an emergency session. The hall was cold, metallic, and sterile, the walls lined with screens showing the orphanage, reports from scientists, and even social metrics of the children's behavior. "We underestimated him," the governor said. "We thought a child could be contained. But he cannot be contained. He has influence that we cannot control." Another council member shook his head. "He is only 7. How can he hold such sway? It is impossible." "It is not impossible," Mira Ellison said, addressing the council through a communication link. "It is genetics. He carries the bloodline of the First Empire. Leadership, courage, wisdom, these traits are encoded in him. His mind and presence draw people naturally. He is a human capable of inspiring loyalty without command." The room grew silent. The counselors exchanged nervous glances. No one wanted to believe that a child could be so powerful, yet the evidence was clear. Meanwhile, Kalen went about his daily life with quiet confidence. He did not seek attention or power. He played with other children, helped caretakers, and explored the orphanage. Yet everywhere he went, people followed. They instinctively listened to his advice, mimicked his gestures, or paused to watch him in silence. Even when he was not speaking, his presence inspired calm and order. One afternoon, a group of older children tried to block his way to the library, intending to tease him. But Kalen did not shout or fight. He simply stepped forward, smiled faintly, and spoke in his soft, clear voice, "We can go together. There is enough space for all of us." The children froze, then moved aside. Without force, without anger, he had guided them. The caretakers who witnessed it were astonished. The agents watching from hidden observation posts took detailed notes, but their reports could not capture the subtle power in his presence. Even the council could not ignore the growing pattern. Each report highlighted his ability to lead, inspire, and protect. Machines responded to him, animals followed him, children looked to him, and even the staff unconsciously deferred to his judgment. A young teacher named Eleanor, assigned to monitor him, remarked quietly to her colleague one morning, "It's like he carries a light inside him. People can't help but follow it." The colleague nodded, uneasy. "It's not right. He's just a child. And yet, every time he walks by you feel drawn." The council debated whether to intervene further. Some proposed sending him to a secure facility, away from the colony, to study and control him. Others feared that moving him would awaken a backlash, as the people had already begun to admire and trust him naturally. Meanwhile, Kalen's understanding of himself was growing. He began noticing that his golden eyes seemed to glow faintly in moments of emotion, when he was happy, concerned, or trying to help someone. He felt connected to the people around him in ways he could not explain. He began to understand that he had a responsibility to those who trusted him, though he did not yet grasp the full meaning. One evening, as he sat under the observation dome watching stars twinkle through the thin glass, he whispered to himself, "I just want to help. I don't want to lead, but everyone listens anyway." His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight the council would later learn could not be ignored. That night, Dr. Mira Ellison reviewed her notes and smiled faintly. "He will change everything," she said softly, "whether we are ready or not." The council, meanwhile, continued to fret, planning more ways to control him. But each plan failed quietly, unnoticed, as Kalen's influence grew naturally. Courage, wisdom, and leadership flowed from him, not taught, not forced, but inherited and awakened. And so life went on in the orphanage, with the council's attempts at control thwarted by the boy they underestimated. Kalen Ward, the golden-eyed orphan, was no longer just a child. He was a symbol, even if he did not yet understand it. The blood he carried, the ancient line of rulers, thinkers, and leaders, was stirring quietly, and the world around him was beginning to take notice. Every smile he shared, every gentle word, every small act of kindness strengthened the bond people felt toward him. Machines obeyed, animals followed, children listened, and adults unconsciously deferred. The council had tried to control a force far greater than themselves, a child whose very existence carried courage and leadership beyond his years. And in the quiet corners of the orphanage, as Kalen closed his eyes at night, he dreamed, not of power, but of a future where he could help, guide, and protect. He did not yet know that the galaxy would soon need him more than anyone could imagine. The sky over Leora 7 darkened suddenly, and alarms rang through the colony. A fleet of alien warships had appeared over the horizon, black and sharp against the pale atmosphere. Their engines roared and their weapons glowed red, ready to strike. Panic swept through the settlement. Soldiers scrambled to prepare defenses, citizens ran for shelter, and helpers tried to organize supplies. But fear was heavy in every heart. Kalen Ward, though still a boy of only 12, stood in the center of the main plaza. His golden eyes caught the light of the setting sun, shining brighter than any warning signal. He did not shout, he did not panic. He simply looked around at the frightened faces of humans and said clearly, "Follow me. Stay calm. We can do this together." At first, some hesitated. How could a child lead them? How could someone so small guide a colony facing total destruction? But there was something in Kalen's eyes, something in the way he stood, that made fear melt into focus. One soldier, a tall man named James Carter, stepped forward. "If he can lead us, we'll follow," he said. And the rest fell in line behind them. Kalen moved quickly, pointing to positions for barricades, signaling groups to cover entrances, and organizing evacuation routes. The people listened instinctively. Even the helpers, who had never fired a weapon in their lives, found themselves doing exactly what he suggested. It was as if his golden eyes gave silent commands that reached into their minds, bringing courage and clarity. As the alien ships descended, Kalen ran toward the makeshift command center. He guided engineers to set up defensive turrets and explained, in simple words, how the colony could work together to slow the invaders. When a squad of soldiers hesitated at the sight of the approaching fleet, he stepped forward and said, "We are stronger together. Stand with me and we will protect our home." The soldiers, inspired by the confidence and calm of a child, tightened their grips on their weapons and followed him without question. His eyes seemed to glow even brighter as he gave directions, and everyone noticed. It was as if the golden light carried strength and determination. When the first wave of alien fighters attacked, the humans fought with a coordination they had never known. Guided by Kalen, they aimed carefully, covered each other, and moved as one. His simple commands: hold the line, protect the civilians, focus on their engines, carried weight beyond his years. Soldiers obeyed, citizens helped without fear, and even the machines seemed to respond, firing turrets with uncanny precision. The aliens were surprised. They expected chaos, panic, and easy victory. Instead, they faced a united colony, organized and inspired by a child. They tried to push forward, but each assault was met with calm resistance, precise maneuvers, and courageous defenders. At one point, an alien dropship landed near the colony's supply depot, ready to destroy food and medicine. Kalen ran ahead with a group of volunteers, directing them to block the attacker's path. With careful planning and quick thinking, they managed to disable the drop mechanism, saving the supplies. The humans cheered quietly among themselves, but Kalen did not stop. He kept moving, giving orders, guiding, inspiring, and never losing focus. Even the colony council, watching from the safety of a reinforced bunker, were stunned. "Is he commanding them?" one whispered. "He's just a boy," another said, trembling. But it was clear. Soldiers, civilians, and helpers alike were following him as if he had always been meant to lead. Hours passed and the battle raged. Kalen remained at the center of it, coordinating movements, boosting morale, and encouraging everyone to stay calm. He never raised his voice in anger. He never shouted in fear. His presence alone gave strength to the humans, and slowly the tide began to turn. When the alien ships attempted a second wave, they were met by coordinated fire, quick defensive maneuvers, and fearless humans inspired by Kalen. The alien pilots hesitated, confused by the discipline and courage of a colony they expected to crush easily. One by one, the ships were disabled or forced to retreat. By the end of the day, the alien fleet withdrew completely. The colony of Leora 7 had survived. The humans cheered, hugging each other and celebrating the victory. Soldiers saluted, citizens danced in relief, and helpers cried tears of joy. Kalen, exhausted but calm, looked around at the scene. His golden eyes reflected the sunlight and the glow of the settlement fires. For the first time he realized what had happened. It was not magic, it was not luck. It was the blood in him, the ancient royal lineage his DNA carried, that allowed him to inspire, to lead, and to unify. Dr. Mira Ellison approached, smiling and shaking her head in amazement. "It's real," she said. "The legends were not just stories. Your blood, your heritage, it's real power, Kalen. You saved them all today." Kalen did not feel proud. He only felt responsibility. "I just helped," he said softly. "They were brave. I only showed them the way." But everyone around him knew it was more than that. Soldiers who had followed him called him their leader, citizens treated him with reverence, and the caretakers realized that the golden-eyed orphan was unlike any human they had ever known. Even as the celebrations continued, Kalen quietly walked through the colony, checking on those who had been hurt, helping repair damage and comforting those who were frightened. His leadership was not loud or violent, it was calm, steady and full of care. That night, under the stars, he looked at the horizon where the alien ships had disappeared. He understood for the first time that his bloodline was not just a story from the past. It was living in him, shaping his mind, his courage and his heart. The legend of the first human empire had survived in him, and through him the people of Leora 7 had survived as well. The council, who had once tried to control him, now watched in awe and fear. They realized too late that the golden-eyed boy was more than a child. He was a leader, a symbol and a force that could not be ignored. Kalen did not seek power, fame or glory. He only sought to help, to guide and to protect. Yet, through his actions he proved one thing to the galaxy. His lineage was not just legend, it was real, tangible and unstoppable. The humans of Leora 7 would never forget the day a child led them to victory, inspired courage where there was fear, and showed that greatness could come from the most unexpected place. Kalen Ward, the golden-eyed orphan, had proven that true power was not taken. It was awakened, nurtured and shared. And the universe had seen for the first time the strength that a single human could carry within. The battle was over. Leora 7 was safe, and the alien fleet had disappeared beyond the edge of the system. Smoke still drifted from damaged buildings, and the colony slowly began to pick up the pieces. People moved carefully through the streets, helping each other rebuild homes, tend to the wounded and repair essential systems. The air was heavy with relief, exhaustion and a quiet awe. Kalen Ward walked among them, quiet but alert. His golden eyes reflected the flickering lights of the colony fires, calm and steady even after the chaos. He did not walk with soldiers at attention or citizens cheering behind him. He walked as if he belonged to the world around him, not above it. People noticed, and many followed silently, trusting his judgment without question. The council, who had once tried to control him, gathered in the main hall to discuss what had happened. Their fear had turned to recognition. They had underestimated the boy from the orphanage, the child with golden eyes. Now they realized the truth. He carried the blood of the original human royal line, the lineage of leaders, thinkers and warriors whose influence had shaped humanity centuries ago. One council member spoke quietly, almost to himself, "All this time we feared him, and he has saved us." Another added, "He did not seek power, yet he commanded it effortlessly. His presence alone guided our people." The realization was humbling. Kalen had not used force, threats or fear to lead. He had led through courage, kindness and instinctive understanding of people's hearts. Every soldier, every citizen, every helper had felt that guidance and followed willingly. That was the true power of his bloodline, wisdom and leadership born from heritage nurtured by his character. Meanwhile, Kalen did not consider himself a ruler. He never asked for titles, honors or recognition. His focus was on the people around him, on ensuring that everyone was safe, and that the colony could continue to thrive. He moved through the settlement, helping repair buildings, comforting frightened children, and checking on the injured. He listened to concerns, offered advice, and quietly inspired everyone to work together. Dr. Mira Ellison watched him closely. She had followed his growth for years, observing his unique abilities, his intelligence, and his leadership. Now she saw how the colony had responded. "He doesn't command with words or authority," she said to herself. "He leads because people believe in him. He leads because he is worthy." Children who had once played in the orphanage with him now told stories of his calm guidance during the battle. Soldiers shared tales of his presence in the plaza, how a single glance or a few words could give them courage. Even the adults who had doubted him admitted that they had been wrong. Kalen was not merely a child. He was the embodiment of the legacy they had long forgotten. As the days passed, life in the colony returned to a peaceful rhythm. The council worked alongside citizens to rebuild homes and restore systems, always mindful of Kalen's quiet influence. He never gave orders, never imposed rules, but people continued to follow his example. They worked harder, helped each other more willingly, and approached challenges with unity and calm. Kalen spent hours studying the old colony records and histories. He learned about human expansion into the stars, the lost colonies, and the royal line his blood had carried. He understood that his heritage gave him a responsibility, but he also understood that power without care was dangerous. He chose to guide humanity quietly, offering wisdom, encouragement, and example rather than rulership. The council eventually came to respect him. They no longer tried to control him, recognizing that any attempt would be unnecessary and ineffective. Instead, they sought his advice in subtle ways, knowing that his insight was valuable. He guided them not as a king over them, but as a human among humans, leading by demonstration rather than decree. Stories of the golden-eyed boy spread beyond the colony. Neighboring settlements learned of the orphan who had inspired bravery and unity. Humans in other systems began to speak of him in whispers of admiration, though Kalen himself remained unaware of much of the attention. He did not seek fame, only the quiet assurance that people were safe and working together. Even years later, as the colony thrived, children still asked to hear the story of how a boy had led them through fear and danger. Kalen would smile, sometimes tell the story simply, and always remind them, courage, kindness, and care were more important than titles or power. The people remembered him not as a ruler or a conqueror, but as the human who rose from an orphanage and awakened courage, loyalty, and hope in an entire civilization. The golden eyes that had once made people fearful now became a symbol of guidance and trust. They reminded everyone that greatness did not always arrive in the form of armies or rulers. Sometimes it came quietly in the form of a child who chose to help, who led by example, and who inspired others to rise to their best. Kalen continued to live among the people, watching over them without ever demanding anything in return. Soldiers, helpers, citizens, and children all knew that he was different, yet they loved and respected him for his humility, his bravery, and his unwavering care. In time, the legend of Kalen Ward, the golden-eyed orphan, became part of human history. He was remembered not for commanding empires, not for taking power, but for showing humanity what it meant to unite, to protect, and to believe in one another. His influence spread quietly, shaping generations to come, and proving that the blood of the old royal line was not just about authority, it was about the courage, wisdom, and guidance to lead humanity toward its brightest future. Even as he grew older, Kalen never sought to rule. He continued to walk among the people, offering help, encouragement, and quiet guidance. His golden eyes, once feared, now shone as a beacon of hope. The colony thrived, inspired by his presence, and humans across the stars would remember the boy who had risen from an orphanage to awaken the courage of an entire civilization. The galaxy learned a lesson that day. Leadership is not always about power or force. Sometimes, it is about heart, wisdom, and the quiet strength of one human willing to guide others toward unity and hope. Kalen Ward embodied that lesson perfectly, and humanity would never forget him.